The Metropolitan Police are being investigated, yet again, by the IOPC, this time after a 91-year-old woman with dementia was handcuffed, placed in a spit hood and threatened with a taser in Peckham on May the 9th, following a call of an incident between a woman and her carer. Currently, one PC has been suspended whilst 5 others are on restricted duties following the incident in which, although one of the constables claims to have been spat on by the woman, a former senior Met police officer says he didn't understand why such force needed to be used on a clearly vulnerable elderly woman, adding that the additional restraints used on a woman could have killed her. The Metropolitan Police statement claims that handcuffs and a spit hood were used, but other outlets use words additional restraints but fail to identify what that means. Obviously they have leg restraints that they can use, but other than that I don't know what the other restraints were that they could have used. However, a neighbour who saw what was happening said, "I could hear her crying and screaming. I looked out of my window and I could see they had her strapped down on a stretcher. It was awful. There were 2 police cars and a van. You would think with all these people they would be able to manage it without tying her down." So maybe she was strapped down on the bed by police or ambulance staff. It's unclear at this time. Former Metropolitan Police Commander John O'Connor said it was shocking and that they could have easily killed her with their heavy-handed treatment. This was a very aggressive way to treat a 91-year-old woman who was clearly very distressed. What possible threat could this very old lady have posed to these much younger police officers? It is beyond comprehension. To handcuff and place a spit hood on her like that and then red dot her with a taser is absolutely appalling. This should have been dealt with as a medical matter by professionals who knew what they were doing. The officers clearly had no idea how to deal with this distressed elderly woman and have used extreme measures instead of a gentler approach. This kind of action can kill an old person. The officers should never have used this equipment on the 91-year-old. They have let themselves and their uniform down. It's a shameful way to treat someone so vulnerable. The Metropolitan Police said in a statement that on Tuesday the 9th of May officers were called to an address in SE15 following reports of a disturbance between a woman and her carer. Officers attended and identified a 91-year-old woman who was distressed. After officers attempted to engage with her, she was restrained using handcuffs and a spit hood applied after it was alleged one officer was spat at. The woman was then taken to hospital. She was not arrested. During the course of the incident, an officer issued a red dot challenge with their taser, but did not discharge it. Following an initial assessment by the DPS, one officer has been suspended and their use of taser withdrawn. A further 5 officers have been placed on restricted duties, meaning they will have no contact with the public while the incident is investigated. The woman's family are aware of the incident. Police are in contact with them and arranged for a family member to view body-worn video of the incident. 6 have been identified as being involved, and this shows the absolute joke standards of policing that we've got these days. The caller, I imagine, would have mentioned it was an elderly woman with dementia, possibly stating her age at 91, and yet 6 get themselves involved. Why? Maybe they had a slow day that day and had to let some dangerous criminals go for fear of getting a beating, and a 91-year-old dementia sufferer would be a perfect victim for them to get their revenge on. This is somewhat reminiscent of another situation back in 2022 in which one-legged, wheelchair-bound 93-year-old Donald Burgess, who also suffered with dementia, was parva-sprayed, tasered, battened and handcuffed by Sussex police. In Mr Burgess's incident, the IOPC said that the officers, both police constables, arrived to be shown by care home staff into a room where Mr Burgess was holding a knife. Officers briefly engaged with Mr Burgess before one used parva spray, which is like pepper spray, followed by a baton. The second deployed a taser before the knife was removed from Mr Burgess and he was handcuffed. Mr Burgess was taken to hospital after the incident, where he stayed for 3 weeks until he died on the 13th of July in hospital. Deborah Coles, the executive director of the human rights charity Inquest, said that she was deeply disturbed and in disbelief at the level of force used against the elderly man. She said, "It is almost unconscionable to think of a highly vulnerable old man with dementia in a care home being subjected to such a use of force at the hands of the police. It begs the question why there was a police and not a medical response to a man in such obvious distress." She added, "It is vital that there is a criminal investigation that is prompt and effective to ensure those responsible are held to account." Now, I have looked and I cannot find any outcome yet to the investigation, even on the IOPC's website, and there doesn't appear to have been an inquest into Mr. Burgess's death, so let's hope that that gets sorted soon and someone held to account. And let's also hope that the police's latest victim doesn't succumb and we have to report on yet another death following an overreaction and a use of excessive force by the police.